Welcome to our dialogue. We're so excited that you're going to be here for this experience. Ariel and I are going to really have a conversation and dive in around connecting with ancestral practice, with land-based practice. We're going to talk about our own unique journeys on this path, and then also some ways to support you in connecting to your unique journey on this path. And before we begin, I invite you just to notice your breath as it's coming in and out. Drop into sensing your body in this space and this time. Feeling the support of whatever you're sitting on. Noticing what it feels like sensation-wise in the body. To just notice that you've got some support. Beneath your seat, your back. Letting yourself drop in. Noticing if there's any part of you that wants to move, allowing the movement to take place. If there's any part of you that wants to stretch, wiggle. Taking another breath in. This time exhaling through the mouth. Taking another breath in. Letting go out through the mouth. On this breath, just seeing if there's any room to deepen the breath in and letting go on the out. And welcome to this space. In this time, you can let your eyes go around the room, take in anything that is pleasant, connecting back to the body, and connecting here with us.
Yay, thank you, Jessica. So we're really excited for this conversation. It's something I think Jessica and I both have talked a lot about, of just those of us who feel called to living in a more land-based way. What does that really look like when we don't have specific lineages that have continued from the beginning, right? From living with the land, our ancestors that lived with that their whole lives. A lot of us in different places in the country, let's say, or the world, may be trying to remember. We may have ancestors that are close enough that we can learn about the practices, but then there also may be ones that are not close enough, so we can't learn directly. And then the ones that we can learn still have been affected by modern day oppression and colonization and these things. So there may be things about it that don't resonate with us anymore, or there are little tweaks that we want to do that make us feel more resonant with it. So that's something we really want to talk about. And so we'll talk through different prompts and ideas about this topic. But first, we can take some time to introduce ourselves. Jessica, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself now first.
Sure. Great reminder to introduce ourselves. Um, my name is Jessica Dyer, and my work is in an evolution. I was a somatic therapist for a long time, and I've been working more with earth-based energy medicine in the connection to our bodies. Uh, and that has led to the ancestral and land-based practice journey. And so, yeah, excited to talk more about that.
Yeah, thank you. And my name, if you don't know me, is Ariel Yoon. And I've actually been doing a lot of refocusing in my business. So I've been also working on really describing my work and also doing a lot of changes in what my focuses are. But what I would say right now, what my focuses are specifically working with people who are on the healing path, but also are really interested in like kind of walking their highest mission work. And I'm interested in doing the healing to help support that journey to so that you can do the best work in your life possible, and then we can create new systems and we can create a new world. And so doing that in different ways between healing and doing practical work like helping with, let's say, if you work in a toxic work culture, helping support you in your leadership in that workplace. And then also doing conversations like this that to me, I think are really important to start to support ourselves in creating, things completely new and a new culture
Mm.
around this and so more support. So that's kind of, I guess, the summary.
Mm.
But yeah, and I think I feel very connected to this topic, which I think actually goes into our next question. I was remembering is why does this topic interest us? And I think for me, as someone who's mixed, my parents, it's like both my parents are biracial. So my dad is half Korean, half Jewish Russian. My mom is half Mexican, half Hungarian. And I think as someone who feels, super mixed, that's really been part of my identity. It's been really interesting because there's been kind of finding my place with, how I relate to my ancestry has felt a little bit more complicated because, the way that I relate to society and how I think people see me can be different because I'm like, oh, well, I feel very connected to my Mexican heritage because I grew up really close to my grandma from Mexico and she taught me a lot, or she was like a second mom to me. And so, but I don't know how Mexican American people view me or Mexican people view me. And I don't know if I feel like I can take all of these practices as my own, or that feels really right to me as, that part of my heritage does feel pretty like assimilated, where they don't actually do the types of ancestral reverence anymore. And so I really had to kind of learn on my own. And so finding kind of how to navigate those things really, I think, brings me to this conversation. And I think that I made a video like promoting this to also say, I also think a lot of the conversation to people of European descent is, well, go find your own practices, but because the practices are further back, because Christianity has been in the region a lot longer, it's not just so simple to say, oh, just go find your
Mhm.
practices, end of story. And where to like kind of navigating that question, I think is very interesting to me and something Jessica and I have talked about. So that's why I
Mhm.
was excited to share this conversation more. So that's my answer to why this topic interests us. I don't know about you, Jessica.
Yeah, that was a beautiful transition into why it interests me. I am of European descent. Both of my mom and dad sides are from Europe. My dad was actually an immigrant himself. And my mom, her parents were immigrated. So they're Swedish, Welsh, and English lineage. And, being born and raised in America in a white family, there is not, in my family's practice, there really has been very little connection to ancestral practice or reverence at all. And in I mentioned earlier the somatic work. In the somatic work, we really go into the body, and then when diving deeper into the earth-based energy work, which are really the indigenous practices that are really the origins of most somatic work in this world. But because of the world we live in, they take out the spiritual connection part and just talk about the somatics for the first part of my career. But so when I've been diving into the actual roots of somatic work, our bodies are an expression of the earth, right? We hold the elements of the earth within us. And so my first connection into really connecting with ancestral practice uh, was in connecting to the land, and the land actually being our original ancestors. And before I was able to really connect with any um, ancestral lineage on my part. It was the land that was really holding me and really feel like I could really feel that connection and communication through the earth and the water and the elements. And so why does it interest me? Because it is to go from not having that connection and experience to having that connection was like a whole new world opened up of feeling. There's just so much healing that can happen in that connection because, most of us, we have human, well, if you're on this, you have human parents. Um, and likely there's some wounding, right? Because we are human beings. We live in a world where humans have a lot of wounding. And so there can be a lot of wounding in our attachment relationships and our caregiver relationships. And the sense of belonging and place and purpose when you connect to the land, when you connect to the ancestors, it's like a backdrop to hold all of the stuff that we have to work through in this lifetime. It's like, oh, all of this, like, not that it doesn't matter, but it doesn't have to derail me. I get to feel belonging and loved and held by a larger source than what my family can necessarily offer. So that's why it feels so important to me. It feels like so healing to connect into. And it's a journey. I think, it's my being of European descent, the connection to the land, the land-based practices, which are in all of our most ancient lineages, right, have been really eradicated. And so there are people that are trying to bring it back and trying to reconnect, and that's beautiful. But it's all a practice and a journey, and not easy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I resonate with so much of what you said. And um, yeah, I think I know I work a lot with my teacher, Miriam Hasnan, and she often uses the term like earth stewards, and I think there
Mm,
are those of us who maybe just from a young age have felt more connected to the land just naturally.
yeah.
I've said before that I feel like I was raised by the mountains. Like I would go hiking all the time. I'm from California and I lived walking distance about 15 minutes from a trail and I would go there all the time, like every day. And I would go deep into the mountains in places that there was no one else. And I feel like I got so much support and clarity in those times, in a way that my human family couldn't provide for me.
Mhm.
And I think what's so beautiful about land-based work is, and what really intrigues me is that there is so many deeper values you can get from it, right? So, and
Mhm.
that's what I'm really interested in. It's not necessarily I'm going to do this exact practice that I'm taught, um, and go sell it to other people, right? That's the problem with things being
Mhm.
extractive or cultural appropriation. But it's like I'm trying to do this practice so that I can learn the deeper lessons that I would learn if my whole family, if I was surrounded by living with the land my whole life. And so
Mhm.
one of those things that I think, all of our teachers, and Jessica and I have shared teachers like
Mhm.
Mari Lou,
Mhm. Mhm.
really resonate, I mean, really emphasize is doing, being in right relationship with the land, for example. So doing land offerings. And so those practices, once you learn these kind of core tenets of what we're supposed to be doing or the energy of being in right relationship, then you really learn that you can adapt that for yourself. And what does that look like for you? It doesn't need to be in a way that, doesn't resonate with you. Like maybe giving the land food might resonate with you or might not. Or maybe you feel more resonant in singing a song to the land or reading a
Mhm.
poem or maybe like you actually like the idea of cooking something and giving it, but allowing yourself to really go inward with what is actually resonates with you about these practices. How do you actually make it your
Mhm.
own? And in that, more of your heart will be in it.
Mhm.
Um, and then it will be more, more connecting. So yeah, I just wanted to say that about that. And so I guess we kind of hit on this, but I think there's probably a little bit more we can go into of just like how has our journey been like connecting to these practices, to these ancestral practices, to the land-based practices. Yeah, maybe just giving a little bit more kind of context of like, yeah, that story.
Hmm. Yeah, I think just continuing with the what you were saying there around the offerings and the being in right relationship. Um, I think when I first heard about it, I was like, okay, I was really worried about doing it right. About, if I was offering my blood, well, what's the correct protocol here? And
Wait, you have to say like, what do you mean by offering your
oh,
blood?
thank you. Yeah,
Because I'm like,
so
that could
one,
sound like creepy witchy. It's obviously still a little witchy, but maybe like the comfort level the comfort level of like how witchy and creepy it is.
yeah, thank you. Um, so by offering the blood, not no sacrifice, just it's a practice of collecting your menstrual blood and offering your menstrual blood to the earth rather than, what we were, well, I don't know about, but for most of us in the West, like taught that our blood is dirty, that our cycle is something to be ashamed of and embarrassed of, to hide. Um, and so really shifting the paradigm that our menstrual blood is actually really valuable and beautiful and worthy of being offered. Um, and yeah, and so this my beginning of doing this was really I was really concerned about doing it right. Um, which I think is a normal thing for us as we're just doing anything new and engaging in any new practices, like wanting to get it right. So it can be helpful to have like some basic framework to start from, but then the evolution has been this really wonderful, and what I hope for all practices is really an invitation to really feel into what is meaningful for me. And so and that changes every month, right? Instead of having like this is the exact way to do it, like, well, this month I feel really called to go sit with the water and like offer to the water. This month I feel really called to actually the land that I am living on that's holding me in this particular tree, and I want to offer with this tree and be in reciprocity. And so it's been a journey from like, oh, what am I doing, to like, no, this feels so personal and so meaningful. And the shift that I also really appreciate about right relationship and actually being in connection with the land and in offering, whether it's your blood or a song or a poem, whatever it is that it shifts from not only from like, okay, extractive, and I'm just like here on this planet and I'm just taking from the earth, but it actually shifts into I am a being of worthiness. And in my worthiness, I'm worthy enough to offer and give something of value, of worthiness to the earth. And she receives that. And and in that is continuing this supportive relationship and this dynamic. And so I really think it helps shift us into our worthiness as beings in this interconnected web of life. And so that for me was a really big shift of like being able to feel worthy.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I really resonate. And I think um what you were sharing reminded me of just so I guess like I said, I feel like I've always felt very connected to the land, but when I was wanting there was some time where I was in my dark night of the soul and I was really feeling this call to really learn deep spiritual practices. And in the past, the healing work I had been doing was a lot more probably in the personal development world, a lot more new agey stuff. And I was feeling so in that, I think that I thought that people had the answers, like I was like, well, if I learn specifically from I know like in Texas, there's a lot of people who are reconnecting with their indigenous roots, who are Mexican, a lot of people who are Mexican American, and they're reconnecting with their indigenous roots. And so it's like, oh, these people may have the answers, or these people, or this people. And I was kind of looking outside of myself a lot. And I see that a lot actually still. Like I think a lot of people, that's kind of the first step. But what I have really realized is that, at least how I feel as a healer, as someone who's now worked with a lot of people, I think that all of us are affected by oppression, like all of our families
Mhm.
have been, and it really has created huge, um, you know, I'm like trying to think of the right word, but like cutting through, the wisdom from
Mhm.
our ancestors, of healed ancestors. Like a lot
Oh
of
yeah.
there's so it's very fractured, you know. There's not really a group of people like in a very broad sense that have all the answers. Of course, there may be
Yeah.
people we find that we really resonate with them, and we're like, you know, I know Jessica and I have both worked in some ways with the Caro Inca
Mhm.
lineage in Peru. And so we might find like, oh yeah, these people, I really resonate with them, but there might not be this zoomed out, like every single person that is, indigenous in the Peruvian mountains, I'm going to resonate with. And I think really allowing ourselves to have that power of discernment and realize it's going to be a process. It's not going to be something that one day I'm going to have the confidence. And it's not anything that anyone can give us either.
Mm.
The confidence that how I'm doing it with my connection with nature is the right way, but it's something that develops over time, and you start to just really realize like, oh yeah, I do actually have energetic power. And when I
Mhm.
light a candle for my ancestors, it does make a difference, and I am connected to all that is. And we
Mhm.
allow that feeling in more and more, and then we realize the practices as they are done, it doesn't actually always matter, the form, it matters the intention. So I could be, whispering my intention on a stone and putting in the river. It could be so simple. And that actually can be something that's really impactful. And I don't need it to be something that's specifically taught to me. Oh, I'm like, too many drinks around. Something that's specifically taught to me by people. And I think to me the reason why this topic is also really important to me is also because um I do think in modern day times there is some need um of like fusing together values. It's like I have a
Mhm.
value to connect with the earth and like connect with, herbalism is so popular now, and learn about that. But I also have a value of like, how do we actually undo a lot of the environmental destruction that we are creating? And so, does me shipping this herb that my ancestors worked with, let's say
Mhm.
my Hungarian ancestors from Hungary, like, is that something that I need to do because some healer says that that's how I should do it and that's how it's been done? Or actually, should I learn to create that same resonance and feeling with
Mhm.
an herb that's local? And I actually may have more depth of knowledge with it, and depth of relationship by actually cultivating the same lifelong relationship with it as my ancestors would have. And so I think that those questions of how do we fuse together these values that are all really important, I think is a really important thing that we need to broadly be talking about. That is why like I really am passionate about people allowing themselves to really go inward about what these practices look like.
I just love everything you're saying. And I think it's sparking a few things. And one, if we're talking about land-based and ancestral practice, I do think those of us who are born in the US in particular, we have this uh, dynamic that is different where we were born in the US. So our physical bodies were actually born here. So there is some resonance that we have in a way that is with this land, and our ancestral line is with other land. And so there's like this um way in which our each of our expressions is going to be unique and each of our relationships is going to be unique. And so just like you were saying, it's so easy to want to look to someone else for the answer. I think that's in spiritual development and personal development, like that's the journey of to maturity is to look outward and then realize, oh, we actually need to look in. And particularly, we need to look within and develop our own relationship because no one else is going to have our unique expression and our unique uh, difference with the place-based, land-based connections and ancestral connections. And I think even the Carol people, we have worked with some of them, and they, when they do initiations, like for coming into right relationship with mother, they call on the mountain spirit that you were born near. And so it is really when you're born, the mountain spirit around there, according to their understanding, is really a protective spirit that's with you for your lifetime. And then we have our ancestral lineage in other lands. And so it's just so dynamic, and the responsibility to go within and really trust that you do have that ability and you do have that connection because you are a child of the earth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, I think that's really an interesting like point that you're bringing up because I think that that's what, as someone who now I feel like I'm really interested more and more in having these conversations where we're like, okay, what's your medicine, and helping people connect with
Mhm.
their medicine as well. And what I've been finding in that inquiry is our medicine a lot of times is a conglomeration or whatever you would say of multiple things. There's a lot of
Mhm.
different things that make us, and
Yeah.
I know when I went to Hungary, I went there for ancestral healing experience with Daniel for in person in May, and that was really amazing. And it was my first time in Hungary, and it was very healing being on the land. Like I could feel
Mhm.
that I had this deeper connection with that land than I had realized. And I could feel that the land was welcoming. That's how I felt when I was
Mhm.
there. And that was really beautiful, and of course, that's very different than, let's say, the mountains of California, where, that those mountains really know me as, through
Mhm.
childhood, through my middle school years, where maybe my relationship with the land in Hungary feels very much like they're like, okay, we can tell you're wanting to do ancestral healing, which is also going to heal the trauma of the land. And so we're excited you're here. It's a
Yeah.
different relationship.
Yeah.
And that makes who I am too, those gifts from those ancestors and also the things that they've really needed to heal. And like
Mhm.
it's everything, it's like, okay, I have, I can connect with these ancient ways. And at the same time, I'm also in a modern day life. And so, what does that look like
Mhm.
today? And I think
Mhm.
that's something we also have to acknowledge because, um, a lot of us actually wouldn't be comfortable if they were like, okay, you want to live in the ways of your ancestors, then the land-based ways here, press this button, and now you're like living in a village, like there would be a lot of blessings
Yeah.
and there would be a lot of discomfort, like a lot of
Mhm.
trying to understand how to actually live that way. How do I
Mhm.
actually go and pick up my water every day and have to walk, a mile to go get water, whatever it is. And
Mhm.
so realizing that where we are today, and it's like, what are the ways that I can make this work for my life now, and my community, and also realize that there is, some contrast in those things. Um, so so kind of talking a little bit about, let's say specifically our ancestral practices. We have different prompts, but the one thing that I was kind of thinking might be a nice segue is kind of how we find that our ancestral practices are supportive. Um, yeah,
Mhm.
and you can obviously talk more about what they are, but yeah.
Yeah. our ancestral practices are supportive.
I can start if you want, or you
Yeah,
can.
I'm like I've just got like 10 different threads, so maybe if
You're
you
like, well,
start,
yeah,
then I'll narrow down on a thread.
I know we've been hitting a lot of topics, which I'm like,
Yeah,
I'm excited because I love this conversation.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
well, I was just gonna say, so I guess in the healing journey, I think specifically for me, my connection with my ancestors really opened up and wanted to open up when I was going through my dark night of the soul. And to me, it's very important. I know a lot of my kind of archetypal struggles. I feel like everyone has their own things that they struggle through their lives that are like lessons they're supposed to learn. And for me, there's a lot of like having to do things alone. So I know that's not everyone's stories, but at the same time, I do think a lot of us do not have the same healed and like elders
Mm-hmm.
that, our ancestors had. A lot of us have a hard time accessing that type of support and
Mm-hmm.
regulation. And so then when you're going through really deep spiritual work and shadow work, it really is a death. Like those moments are very, very difficult. You're doing like deep trauma work. And so to not be held and to not be held as much as you should be held, in modern day society, a lot of us, even if you have the privilege to, let's say, work with a therapist or a healer, let's say once a month or once a week, that's still to me not at all enough of how much support we're supposed to be getting through these times.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so when we don't have that, it's like I really felt like the only way I was going to get through it was by really feeling connected with my ancestors. And by learning a little bit about somatic work, it also tracks that feeling some sort of resources and support is really going to help us go through the underworld journeys that we need to really embody the spiritual path. Because I mean, I know Jessica and I have talked about the new age fake woo energy comes from them not doing the actual work. And the actual work is like the crying on the floor, horrible pain feeling work that's hard, that I'm feeling the pain that maybe all the elders I know have experienced, you know. And so also I feel like this really feels connected are supportive in that I really think it also helps me feel like zoomed out and
Mm-hmm.
supported in the practices. Because one thing that really I think keeps people stuck in their healing journeys is going into shame spirals of just like, oh, there's just something wrong with me that I'm this way, blah, blah, blah. But then when you really connect with your ancestors, you realize, oh, I'm definitely not the only one who's this way because everybody in my dad's family has had this problem. You know what I mean? And then it
Mm-hmm.
helps you see, like, oh, of course, this is hard for me. Like, my dad never healed this. His dad never
Mm-hmm.
healed this. So this is going to be hard for me. I'm going to give myself tenderness and compassion that it's hard. I'm also going to ask for their support in healing it because it's really big. And I really honestly shouldn't, in my perspective, I have like a sassy relationship with my ancestors where when they give me something really hard, I'm like, okay, you guys want me to heal this. Now you got to show up and help me because this is like not funny and it's not cute and it's really hard. But you can ask
Mm-hmm.
for that help because it really isn't just your problem realistically. It's
Yeah.
like, okay, so it's been my whole family's problem and cyclical pain. And so to me, the practices themselves can be super simple. Like a lot of the times I just imagine, often lately I've been imagining my ancestors like sitting around me during my like nightly energy work and giving
Mm-hmm.
me like energy clearings or limpias. I have a little ancestral altar, but as I had mentioned, I don't really resonate with putting pictures because I don't feel like any of the elders that I know that have passed I don't have any assurance that or feeling that they're healed necessarily.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so to me, it didn't really feel resonant to put their picture on because I didn't really feel like they were this spiritual elder for me that I could learn from that way.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a lot of their own suffering still. And so for me, it's more of my practices really are connecting with more healed ancestors, which I in my cosmology, it really resonates to connect more with older ancestors first,
Mhm.
and develop safe relationships with them before doing the more recent ones. So anything like right now, I have, dried lavender on my altar. That's why I keep looking because I'm like, look at what I have. I have some offerings, like I have corn. Corn is very sacred to Mexican tradition. I have a candle, and a lot of the times when I light my candle, I feel like that's a support. Sometimes I'll dress the candle with some spiritual oil. I have a little like wine glass kind of thing. So yeah, it's pretty simple, and a cloth. But I also use that time to, I can go to my altar and ask for something as I'm lighting, or for support as I'm lighting it. And I've been doing a lot of prayer work recently, and I'll be doing more prayer. And I'm also, as I mentioned, part Jewish. So my friend sent me these like Jewish ancestral prayers that are kind of modernized and really made by a very diverse group of people, which I really enjoy. Um, and so sometimes I'll sing along with those prayers. So those are kind of little things. And yeah, I feel like that could go into more stuff, but basically I think just connecting with different things that resonate with me is what I do. So yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I think for me it has been a journey because similarly to you, I don't have ancestors within the range that there could be a picture that feel safe or healed enough to want to connect to. And so when I have done my own meditation connection to the ancestors, the one when I ask to connect to healed ancestors, the ones that show up are very old, and back to in my understanding of when my ancestors were connected to the land, which is many, 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 it's a long time ago in the evolution of the
Someone
world.
really, really long.
Yeah. And so for me, there's also been this real, so my part of my ancestry is that on both of my mom and dad's sides, they were pastors in the Christian tradition. And so religion, I guess you call it. And so for me, really reclaiming and connecting to spirituality, to land-based spirituality, feels like a very uh, shifting and healing of the lineage of my ancestors, who originally were connected to the land and then had it to be so suppressed because of Christianity. And so it feels like there's this real reversal. So I connect. I have a mother, Mary, and then I have a divine mother. Well, I don't know, like a ancient, like a symbol of like the ancient goddess of the like the really round belly and round of like of Mother Earth. And then I have a Mother Earth. So for me, it's really connecting to this uh, sense of unconditional love and holding that was before the Christian church um, changed it. And so that's feels very supportive to me. And I also have this building relationship with a great grandmother who I didn't know, but um, I'm feeling a little teary at this moment. But she came through, and I got a massage from a woman who's very connected to the other realms and, does body work. And my great grandmother came through her, and she was really, she was able, she had the gifts, she had clairvoyant gifts and all of these things. But she was in a very religious paradigm. So she really kept a lot of it hidden. And so she's really come through as this, like, as you step into being visible about being different, like you're healing what we couldn't do, what she couldn't do. Um, so it feels like meaningful, is how it's supportive. And there's this way in which doing my own healing, my own sitting in all of the darkness and the pain somatically, I I see it and I believe that that does reverberate, the indigenous perspective of that's 7 generations back and forward. I do believe as I'm healing, that does shift and actually send healing to the ancestors that are more recent in my lineage that weren't able to experience that. And so I also have a pretty, I'd say my strongest ancestral practice is actually like boundary setting. And so I have an ancestral altar, and I place tobacco there. I place just flowers. It's pretty simple, just like simple things, lighting a candle pretty regularly. And in that, I my prayer is that I'm sending them healing and I'm doing healing, but I'm asking that they don't use my body to process any of their stuff, that I'm going to do my own. And in freeing my own self, then that is what's going to send them the energy that's actually going to be healing for them. And them trying to heal through me isn't actually going to help either of us.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that. I love there's so much you said that I resonated with. And one thing that I was gonna say that reminded me of your story with your grandmother is I do feel for me that my relationship with my ancestors feels like the most supportive relationship with anything, like even, even non-human beings that gives me confidence because I think especially, I've been like this past year has been a really deep trauma healing year. And I'm like, I feel like every day is trauma healing, but this past year has been really intense trauma healing. And there's a lot of unhealthy patterns in my family that then has created, mistreatment and what I've been really witnessing in that is that goes into your subconscious a lot, obviously, like the worthiness, if your parents felt made you feel like your needs didn't matter or were controlling you for their own needs or whatever it is, those harmful behaviors then create such deep patterning within our systems of like, oh yeah, of course my needs don't matter. Of course I'm not like worthy of being treated in this way. And so they can really be so deep within ourselves. And so undoing that is a really tender and long game process. It's not just like a one and done, like, oh, I'm gonna feel this feeling and then it's gonna be done. It's usually a lot of repetition, a lot of let me feel again my worthiness, let me feel again that someone sees me and honors my, my whole being. And I feel like my ancestors really make me feel seen in a way that, I haven't experienced any other way. And obviously it's also probably because I'm also in a place to receive it more from them. But I feel that a lot with my relationship with them, which is really a blessing. And something else that you had brought up that I actually had written today as notes of like something I wanted to mention is that I think that finding, your own connections with your ancestors and the practices and things that resonate with you really is like a inquiry process. It's almost like a somatic practice of like, let me feel into this thing. Does this feel good? Does this thing? So I know when I went to Hungary, they had like really big, lavender fields and a lot of like there would be there was a town where everything that they sold in the whole town was just lavender stuff. And I'm like, so little things like when I order, actually, it's really funny. I went to New Mexico like 2 years ago for my birthday, and I don't drink that much, but they had a lavender cider, and I was like, oh, this is perfect. And I was thinking about that the other day because I'm like, anything lavender, I'll get it, and I love it. But it's also interesting to think like maybe that part of me is also a connection to my heritage where I can like feel that integration in that moment, and you had mentioned tobacco. I feel very much also connected with tobacco, but it's not something I would have realized until I had some time to be exposed to it. And so we get, a little bit of experiencing this, a little bit of that, and then we just kind of really feel into it and see what are the things that resonate with me. Maybe there's plants, like I know that there's a Ashkenazi Jewish herbalism book, and so and I know they're having more and more of those resources online. So there might be, herbal lists of your ancestors that maybe there's specific herbs that you really connect with and want to grow in your backyard or use in different ways. Or just really deeply connect with. Maybe, maybe it's you really want to do like ceremonies outside. Like there's just so many options, or you feel like, oh, my family, I know when I went to Hungary also, in Budapest, Hungary's not a huge country. I mean, it got smaller some time ago, right before my grandpa, or right after my grandpa was born.
Mhm.
But there's a huge river that goes throughout a lot of the country, and that river's it's really big and it's powerful. And so I felt this feeling of like my ancestor being really connected to the river. And so there can be
Mm,
connections with that where it's like you allow yourself to feel that and see, okay, does that resonate with me? Do I want to do now
mhm,
more rituals around the river? And that's going to help me
mhm,
connect deeper. And so
mhm.
just allowing it to unfold and allowing yourself to be in an inquiry process of the things that really resonate with you, and kind of like this research, just like, okay, I'm going here, like, oh, now I see this, or, I'm going to research some stuff online and see if there's any things that I realize about the land that now I can just own, that I like this kind of landscape more, or whatever it is. To help us like deepen in the connection and realize like, oh yeah, that's like my blood that I've shared with my ancestors and my genetics that is making me attracted to this. And that can really help us just, yeah, feel that connection, and it can be subtle.
Yeah, and I love as you're speaking, what's coming through is also just to invite you to ask your ancestors for support. There have been some things I was dealing with in the last couple of weeks that were challenging, and I was feeling that struggle internally. And I think I told Ariel this, but on my birthday, I went to this apothecary, and I was just drawn to this piece of it looks like Palo Santo, but it's not Palo Santo, and it said it was a more sustainable form, and I was drawn to it. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna get this. And when I checked out, the man was like, "Do you know about this?" And it's like, well, other than it's a more sustainable form of Palo Santo, no, I don't know. And he was like, "This is connected to Welsh ancestry," and I was like, "Oh my gosh, that is my ancestry." And I literally had been asking to try and connect more, and for some insight. And then he sent me down this whole, gave me a lot of other recommendations. But so just to echo that, um, it's not like I guess you're like, okay, I want to connect, and now I know how to do all the connection, and it's all there. It's very much an evolution, and when you're paying attention and when you're open, they'll show up, and it will be in little ways, and then you just get to follow the breadcrumbs that they're leaving and then take those in and feel it, and it just gets to be this journey that you go on. So my invitation is to just ask your ancestors, ask your healed ancestors for the support, for what's going to help you connect exactly where you're at today.
Yeah, I really resonate with that as being more of what the journey looks like. Um, yeah, and so we have about 10 minutes. So if there's anything, I just want to say that in case there's anything that you really want to talk about before the end. But I know one thing that we had talked about wanting to talk about was cultural appropriation, which I think we hit on a
Mm.
little bit, but I don't know if there's anything else you
Mhm.
wanted to say about that. Or if you feel like we hit on it, then you can also share about anything else that's coming up.
Um, I think I just in this moment, what's coming up is just wanting to name that I think that can fear of not wanting to culturally appropriate can get in the way of connecting to ancestral practices. And so I'm not saying go take people's practices and sell them and make money off of them, but my invitation would be to just for you to feel connected, connected to the earth, that your relationship with the earth and your ancestors matters. And if there is a practice that supports you in feeling connected for your own journey, then I invite you to feel into that and explore it and play with it. And, I've learned from the Carol people specifically and some other indigenous practices, but um, and it was through their teachings that really opened up these other doors for me. And they expressed, we're all children of the earth. And so having a relationship with the earth and the land and your ancestors is part of what it means to be human. And I'm so grateful to the Carol people for wanting to share and wanting to include people that are not Indigenous. And they would say, you know, this is part of the answer to healing the earth and healing the world and what it looks like today is for us all to reconnect. And so sometimes the journey to connecting to the earth and to our ancestors doesn't start with our exact ancestors, but sometimes the path is a little more windy. And so, yeah, my invitation is always with reverence and with respect and with reciprocity, just exploring what does help you connect and feel aligned.
Yeah, that is actually, I had a very similar conversation with someone else, which I thought was really interesting to think about. She had, she was also of European descent. I forgot the similarities, but I know she studied with the, I might be saying it wrong, but Dagora tradition, which I know is like African, apart
Mhm.
from African indigenous practices that I know, I'm gonna like mispronounce everything, but Elder Sim, I don't remember how to say it. I will put in the show notes. But I think anyways, I'm gonna keep saying random words that I'm like, I know he wrote this book that water is spirit, but anyways. So he did write a book, Healing Wisdom of Africa. I know because I read that book. So anyways, that is a tradition that I think is more open, so it's easier to access like the Kiro Inca that we've taken classes with. And she was saying she felt, because even when she actually shared that she had studied so much Sakura stuff, I actually got a little bit triggered by it. And and it's obviously past stories that I have. So then I was talking to her, but I wasn't like triggered by her. I was just kind of like, I had these past stories come up of like, I don't know how I feel about
Mhm.
that. And then I
Mhm.
was talking to her and she was saying that that she felt like what she wanted, she was doing it so she could like that she felt like it was going to teach her practices for her to then connect with her ancestors, and then and
Mhm.
connect with the land there. And then she was saying, I think she was Scottish, but anyways, she was saying there was some similarity. I don't remember what it was between their like maybe land or something or practices
Mhm.
that also helped her feel like it would be more similar. And
Mhm.
so that it could help her bridge into her own practices. And I
Mhm.
thought that was really interesting. And I think that, yeah, for people of European descent, but also I do feel like there's a lot of people, even if you're not of European descent, that because there's just so much oppression has affected the whole world, it is hard to
Mhm.
really find healers of any tradition to me that are like
Mhm.
super embodied, super
Mhm.
clear channels,
Mhm.
all that
Mhm.
stuff that really deeply resonate. And so because of that, you might have to look in different places, and that
Mhm.
might be your path, or it might be, there's so many different things. But for me, I definitely, when I'm learning from someone else's tradition, just my energy about it is like, I'm learning this to understand the core beliefs,
Mhm.
like the core energy, and to maybe like embody the core energy so that then I can find a way to make it my own in a way that works with, the land here and,
Mhm.
my ancestors and all of that. I'm not trying to go and take it and like sell, like sell myself as a
Mhm.
healer, as like, from this tradition, whatever, though I also
Mhm.
tend to just study more of my own ancestry, but I am lucky because for Mexican tradition, it is more, there's more access to it, but at the same time, it's definitely like curanderismo is like the most accessible folk medicine, but at the same time, it is like a lot of the influences post-colonization,
Mhm.
so it's
Mhm.
how clear is the medicine for every single person? That's a personal inquiry, but I personally
Mhm.
think I still have to practice discernment of who I'm learning from, how am I
Yeah.
learning it, who do I want to work with, those things, and yeah, and then choosing how I want to work with the practices. So
Mhm.
yeah, I think that's the my opinion about it. And I think when we have the energy of just really, because I think what can happen sometimes with like all these stories of don't do this, don't do that, do that, but people kind of get paralyzed and then they just don't
Yeah.
do anything. They're like, well, I
Yes.
don't want people to not like me. And,
Yes.
and so I think at the end of the day, what really matters is you keep checking in with yourself to be moving with the values that you have,
Yeah.
um, that you're going to really move with the values of respect, of, undoing extractive energy within you, and I think
Hmm.
that's where that defensive energy comes from other people is because there is a lot of like extractive energy still in us that we have to undo
Hmm.
also, you know.
Hmm.
But I also think that probably if you're attracted to this conversation, you're probably not on that more like superficial spirituality layer of just like, let me just like do these practices, but I'm not actually really doing the deeper work of like, how am I still part of the systems and all of that stuff because all of it is connected, how we're still part of the systems is going to affect our relationship with the land. It's going to affect our relationship with our ancestors. And it's going to affect the medicine that we hold. We really have to do the work on every level, the shadow work personally, but then the shadow work of how do we personally, um, how are we personally affected and perpetuate these bigger systems? Because we all do, because we're all socialized, and so we have to also do that shadow work of undoing that within ourselves too. Um, so yeah, and to be like more and more aligned with our values. And I feel like if we're attracted to, land-based things, constantly am thinking like, what would it really look like for us to have this village energy, for us to come
Hmm.
together, for us to be respectful of all people, for us to be able to have disagreement, all of these things. And so really just keeping on reflecting on those values and where are we now and how can we show up better tomorrow, with those
Hmm.
values. So yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, everything you're saying, and just I think it's hard to really be connected to the land, connected to earth-based ancestral practice, and not look at the shadow and the extractive nature that lives within all of us and try to undo it. And that might be part of what keeps people afraid of it sometimes. Because it does require really looking at
Mhm.
how have I been participating? How am I still participating in these systems that I cognitively don't like and don't agree with, but I am socialized into. And so it does take a certain level of, yeah, being able to hold and sit with that challenge within and undo and unlearn and unravel, which is
Yeah.
not easy.
And I also will say, because I'm like, I have so many opinions about this topic. I'm like, we're gonna close out. But I will say because I do think at the same time, I think sometimes people want to focus on like the creating the new and they don't want to
Mm,
actually do the shot, which I think is also again the problem with new age spirituality, right? It's like I want to focus on the
yes.
love and light and everything that feels good, but I don't want to do like the underworld stuff to get there, so then it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, and I think that's hard too for people online because there's just so many like there's so much spiritual information out there and healing information, so it's hard to, I think, discern like what's fake and what's real if you like are kind of newer on your path,
Yeah.
or the beginning. And so I know for me it's been something because I think it's part of my intuition. I can see these things. And so to me it's really interesting because there will be people who like their whole path is really doing land-based work, because it is pretty trendy now. So there's so many people, like there's herbalists,
Hmm.
there's people doing plant medicine journeys, or blah, 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 blah.
Hmm.
And it will be interesting to me because those people, even when they're like going to the Amazon all the time, all this stuff, and they'll still be, let's say, like doing little things like using plastic bags, like, on like for everything, or whatever it is. And so to me, it's just interesting because there's no shame about it, but it's just like how am I behaving different from like, I'm like want to honor the earth, but that's really not honoring the earth because it's going to end up in the oceans, and so where is that disconnect happening where like I'm still not having the capacity to really see the ways that I'm still negatively impacting the earth, and I'm more attracted to the ways that personally I can heal, but less on the collective level. And where's that disconnect? And like to me, it's a very interesting conversation. And
Hmm.
like thing because we all are socialized into behaving ways that are counter the earth. So we have to undo it. And it's not easy because it's exhausting. It's like how, like all the things that are easy are pretty much counter earth. So like how do I navigate that? And then if
Yes.
I'm a mother and I have stress and like, but I think the most important thing is that we grapple with that. It's not just like oh, it's
Yeah.
hard, so I'm just gonna stop thinking about it, or I'm just gonna stop talking about it.
Yeah.
Because even in those spaces, even in like plant medicine spaces or whatever, still, if you
Hmm.
bring up like not using plastic, people are gonna get triggered. You know what I mean? So I think that's
Hmm.
just like an interesting thing where it's like, okay, we
Hmm.
have to start having these conversations and grappling with it, and we can let the shame like out the door. It's not a personal problem, it's a collective problem, but how are we in relationship with this collective problem? And that's not going to be an overnight, we're going waste free. Like that's not realistic. And so, yeah, so I think that's just something that is also an inquiry of how do we keep doing this collective shadow work and our personal shadow work and connect with the land and build the worlds we want to live in.
I think you've come up with our topic for dialogue number two.
I'm like, mic drop.
Yes, yes, yes to all of it.
Yay. Well, I guess we could close out. I guess what a good way to end is if there's any, we can put it in the notes too, but if there's any way that people can find you or offerings
Mm.
or anything that you want to share about, and then I can share. And then, yeah, if there's anything else you want to say.
Yeah, I think just most of my offerings are on Instagram or my website is not quite done yet. Instagram, mostly, or email list. So yeah, we can put those in the show notes. But yeah, I think I just want to echo for my final point of what you said, that my hope and intention in all of this, the shadow, the earth-based, the ancestral connection, whatever it is that we continue to grapple and that we continue to show up, and that my takeaway is there isn't one simple solution that somebody's going to have, but that our commitment is to being in constant grappling and dialogue, which is challenging, but worth it.
But also can be beautiful. I know like every
Yes.
little thing I do, I'm like, oh, like I'll just make like one little improvement. I'm like, oh, I feel so good. I'm an earth
Hmm.
steward. I'm like really helping. I'm like, I
Yes.
just started composting with my neighbor. I'm like, look at me. I'm so like
Yes.
friend. But it's just like one thing at a time, and but it
Yes.
isn't easy, but it does take the grappling. So, but it's for the best
Hmm.
in the long term. And then when you look at the wild animals, you'll be like, I feel happy that I'm doing my part of undoing this stuff within me, myself. And then when I do it within myself, I can actually be supportive for other people doing because I'll realize it's complicated. It is.
Yes.
So yeah. And for me, yes, you can find, we'll link my website and you could join my newsletter if you would like. Pretty much keep up all my offerings there. Yeah, and like I said, I do one-on-one sessions, and I've been doing more offerings for doing more like guidance, kind of continuous sessions, and starting to do more conversations like this. So I'm very happy that you watched this conversation. I loved having this conversation. So I'm like, I always think it's good work when I am like enjoying it, which I feel that way in this combo.
Yeah. 100%. Yes.
So thank you.
Thank you.